This is The Download from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis, in for Manuela Bedoya.
And I'm Shreya Sharma. A quick programming note before we get started, The Download will be taking next week off, so we'll be back in your feed on Friday, July 28th.
The Download is brought to you by Magellan AI. Track the trends in spend, ad load, podcasts on YouTube, and more with Magellan AI's advertising benchmark report for Q1, available now. You can find the link in the description or visit magellan.ai.
This week, podcasts are growing globally. Why a podcast election is unlikely, and ad overexposure on CTV could hurt streamers as much as brands. Let's get started!
A new article from Digiday's Sarah Guaglione collects several sources showing podcasting's global growth isn't slowing down. From the article, quote, podcast networks including Acast, iHeart, Spotify, and Wondery, as well as measurement companies like Edison Research and eMarketer, have all clocked international podcast growth in the past year. Wondery is capitalizing on this growth by translating some of its popular podcast franchises and hiring local podcast teams to create original shows catered to their respective audiences, while other networks are still figuring out how to best cater to this audience. End quote. Guaglione observes two trends. International podcast listeners are frequently listening to podcasts from the United States, but they're also embracing global podcasts at the same time. iHeart Podcasts reports their international audience grew around 42% from 2021 to 2022, and roughly 20% of their downloads come from outside the US. Canada, a broad region encompassing Europe, and Australia round out their top 3 download sources outside of the US. According to Declan Moore, Wondery's head of international, some of their podcasts sport up to 40% international listenership. Spotify told Digiday that the Spotify Audience Network's international listenership has grown 72% from Q1 2022 to Q1 2023. While the US remains the largest concentration of podcast listeners, the medium is quickly going global and is growing at a healthy pace.
In this week's issue of Hot Pod, Amrita Khalid covers the new media landscape the 2024 US election will take place in, as compared to previous cycles. The 2008 presidential election can be called the Facebook election, due to the overwhelming presence of the platform at the time. Similarly, Twitter and broadcast news were at the forefront of the 2016 and 2020 elections. Here's a quote from Khalid. As David Pierce noted this week in The Verge, virtually every major social platform that defined the 2010s is closing its walls and shifting its focus to increasing engagement with advertisers, not growing users. Perhaps as a consequence, there's no reigning platform that shapes public discourse in the way that Facebook and Twitter did. Facebook usage is rapidly declining, and Twitter's algorithm favors content from paid subscribers. The number of Twitter alternatives continues to grow. I joined 2, Spill and Threads, just this week, but not a single one appears to dominate the conversation. End quote. Despite the industry's best efforts, podcasting does not have the same presence as Facebook in 2008. But while 2024 may not be a so-called podcast election, it does seem to have a place in the strategy of several candidates. A recent Time piece by senior reporter Vera Bergengruen details how long-shot presidential candidates are hitting the podcast circuit in hopes their appearances will then be clipped and spread to a wider social media conversation. Chief among these examples is Robert F. Kennedy's appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, in which clips of Kennedy's more polarizing claims, including the belief radiation from Wi-Fi networks can open the blood-brain barrier preventing toxins from entering the brain, went viral on social media. Kennedy's book publisher told Time that the interview made his most recent book the number 10 best-selling book on Amazon. Here's another quote from the Hot Pod coverage. Podcasts also allow politicians to target very niche segments of voters in a way that's impossible to do on mainstream media. For example, Joe Biden's appearance on the Smartless podcast last year allowed him to reach mostly millennial and Gen X listeners that may have tapped out of political news completely. For Kennedy, a Democrat candidate whose conspiratorial views led him to being snubbed by many in his party, being a guest on shows like The Joe Rogan Experience and the Jordan Peterson podcast can allow him to tap into new audiences. End quote. So, whether or not the more aggressive examples of politicians appearing on podcasts will turn into long-term benefits for their campaigns remains to be seen, but the fact remains that podcasting is incredibly good at targeting niche and engaged audiences.
In previous issues of The Download, we've covered stories regarding the issue of ad repetition in connected TV, CTV. But a new story from IPG's Magna unit and ad tech firm Nexon adds data to the widely assumption-based coverage of the issue. Digiday's Michael Berge covers it in an article posted this Wednesday. The study is titled, "It's All in the Delivery: How Repeating Ads Affect CTV Viewers, Brands, and Platforms." 1,246 streaming viewers were surveyed on how they felt about the kind of ad-creative repetition CTV has had problems with due to programmatic misfires and delivery system issues. Participants were exposed to 3 ad frequencies, 1, 4, and 6 exposures to the same creative during a 1-hour viewing session. Participants who were shown the ad 6 times did show a 92% recall rate from the sheer repetition, but 48% also found the ad, quote, annoying, end quote, and 33% found the ad's repetition, quote, disruptive to the overall experience, end quote. 16% of the overexposed respondents said the experience lowered their intent to purchase the advertised product. A quote from the article, quote, "It's the halo effect of that reality that should have brands and platforms concerned and ready to change. More than 4 out of 5 participants, 83%, believed the repetition was intentional. Broken down, 68% of viewers attributed the intent to the brand, while 44% believed that the platform intended to repeat the ad. True or not, these assumptions lend to broader implications and potentially actions led by viewers who are not satisfied with their viewing experience." End quote. CTV's teething troubles are to be expected from a newer field, though, it should be noted, podcasting has its tech organized to the point we do not have widespread frequency problems.
Finally, it's time for our semi-regular roundup of articles we're calling Quick Hits. These are articles that didn't quite make the cut for today's episode, but are still worth including in your weekend reading. This week, will podcast ad revenues double by 2025? Not without these 5 things by Tom Webster. If podcasting ad revenue is going to get anywhere close to the 2025 IAB PwC prediction of $4 billion, we need more top-of-mind awareness, improvements to measurement, and innovative ad tech. Podcasts draw devoted audiences, but ad spending lags by Catherine Wolfe. Digiday Research covers data from Sounds Profitable's study, The Podcast Opportunity. Concerns about podcast advertising expressed by buyers included lack of measurement tools, be it lack of knowledge or available options not meeting expectations, and lack of client interest. The rumors of podcasting's death have been greatly exaggerated. Redux, by Eric Nuzum. Pushing back against fear-mongering from recent articles about podcasting's death, Nuzum points to both the industry's growth and increase in resiliency. Why podcast ad creative is pivotal, now more than ever, by Paul Riismandel. As found in the Podcast Opportunity, 45% of buyers say the quality of podcast ad creative is the most important consideration when choosing a podcast publishing partner. Cracking the Code: Gen Z Engagement Through Audio Advertising by Mariam Ahmad. Gen Z have robust online lives and podcasts are well equipped to meet them where they live.
And that was The Download, brought to you by Sounds Profitable. Today's episode was built using Spooler and hosted on Art19. Find out more at spooler.fm and art19.com. I know we went through today's stories fast, so be sure to check out the links to every article mentioned right in your podcast listening app or on soundsprofitable.com/podcast. And thank you for sticking with us as we bring you the top stories you might have missed from the past week. I'm Gavin Gaddis.
And I'm Shreya Sharma. Our producers are Brian Barletta, Gavin Gaddis, and Tom Webster. Special thanks to Art19 for hosting The Download. And thanks to you for joining us. Robot?
Download complete.